I used to feel that sometimes people arguing a lot or debating a lot or a high level of people opposing one another's views was like a sign of a broken culture. I think like it really took me some time to realize though, like the more like debate you have and the more people being comfortable challenging one another's views, that to me is a sign of like a healthy culture. Like if you don't have that, something is wrong.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Your Customer Success. My guest today is Matt Feiner. Matt is a transformational CEO and brand builder with over 30 years of experience driving growth in consumer products. Matt's leadership journey includes scaling SG companies from 85 million to well over 140 million and leading the turnaround of the Rugged Shark brand into a wholesale powerhouse. He's partnered with iconic brands like Sperry, Harley Davidson, and Ralph Lauren, and was named Walmart's Fashion Supplier of the Year in 2024, a testament to both his strategic leadership and deep understanding of, you guessed it, what customers want. Matt, welcome to the show. It is great to have you here, my friend.
Thanks, Gary. Great to be here.
Yeah, it has been great catching up with you. Just editor's note, I have known Matt for quite some time now, and I did the math, Matt, and it's actually been 30 years. So
My God, we're getting old.
we were getting old, but we went to business school together. We were both BAPS and MBAs, so it is great to reconnect with an old friend. And you have a lot to tell the audience here. Just for the audience sake, we're going to talk a lot about corporate culture and leadership today. And Matt is a great person to have on the show to talk about this because Matt had the unenviable task of stepping into a CEO role after someone held it for 40 consecutive years. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. That is true.
So we're going to talk a little bit about culture and changing culture and adapting and leadership. So tell us about that. Like, what was going through your mind during that transition? How did you approach that inevitable shift? It's a change. It's going to be a big shock to people's system. And what was going on with that change, and how did you approach it?
It's a great question. I mean, it was humbling. I was taking over for someone who had actually achieved quite a bit over his 40-year tenure. He was a really big personality. But I was inheriting, not just a job. I mean, it was someone's legacy. So I really, more than anything, I really started listening to the team and trying to build trust with the team was what I did. And, I'd like to think I approached it with a high level of respect, but urgency as well. The company had started to stagnate a little bit and it really needed some fresh thinking and we needed to evolve and modernize to really, go into the future. And yeah, it was a challenge. And, also, he stayed on as my chairman for my first couple of years, so that made it somewhat of a tenuous challenge as well. But he was incredibly supportive in most ways, and but yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. So it does, but that's such an interesting situation to be in because 40 years is, especially these days, quite a long time, quite a long legacy to be taken over for someone. What were some of the signs that the existing culture needed to evolve a little, and how did you prioritize what you were going to address first?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the biggest thing was that he and I were very different in our approaches. He was very autocratic, and I'm much more of a collaborative kind of leader. And I think I really sensed pretty quickly that my senior team in particular that I inherited, who are really a talented group of people, they weren't super comfortable in making calls without me. I wanted to move quickly, and you can't move quickly if people aren't feeling empowered to really make decisions on their own. And so it was frustrating at times in the beginning. Honestly, I would sort of be like, guys, we talked about this. Like, why aren't you moving? And they would say, we didn't know we could, or we weren't sure we were
Right.
allowed to. And so it was pretty apparent that, they needed to know that they were safe to move and achieve, what we wanted to achieve. So I would say that was probably the biggest thing that I noticed pretty early on.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we talked a lot about psychological safety on the last episode, and that's a little bit different take on it. But right, when you're used to that type of environment, the control is a little bit more than you kind of look for these days. And so certainly that's understandable. That was one of the first things you had to address. So talk about a little bit about how you respected that legacy, right? Because sometimes when you come in like that, you don't want to. It's not a complete turnaround situation. You need to respect that legacy, but then you need to push for the bold change. So how did you kind of address respecting the legacy, but pushing for the change that you need?
I mean, I would say more than anything, it was, involving the people and particularly the key employees in the process. So, I made it pretty apparent that I was looking to have a cultural shift and wanted a more collaborative kind of place, less siloed, people working together. And, but it couldn't be just saying, I couldn't tell them, hey, this is what it's going to be. I tried to really enroll them in the overall process. And like I said, like listened a lot. I would really sit, a lot of the people who were there. I mean, I walked into our headquarters and there were about 50 employees, and I would say over half of them had been there for 20 years or more. And so it took a lot of, a lot of listening and a lot of trust building. But more than anything, really made sure that they felt like they were a part of the process. And I think that made a huge difference in how it all went.
And yeah, as expected, I assume there was a lot of people with long tenures in that type of situation. And
Yeah.
we see that a lot too in some of the financial service firms that I've worked in as well. And those environments can change rapidly as well. And that's always a tough situation to have the people that have been there for quite some time know what they're doing, but things are going to change, and we'll talk a little bit more about embracing the change and obstacles in the way. But actually, first, let's take a quick step back. Why don't you tell everybody about that company, because they might not be completely aware of what the company does and maybe who the company's clients truly are.
Yeah, I mean, it was a footwear and apparel company. We did a lot in seasonal footwear, so a lot of slippers and sandals and flip flops and molded clogs and that sort of thing. And we had a kids pajama division, and we had a team that essentially, designed, developed, sourced, sold those kind of products, seasonal products mostly, but to the Walmart's, Targets, Kohl's, Amazon, you name the customer, we sold to them. And a seasonal business is different. It's pretty in and out. So you have to make sure that you're creating product that's going to, once it's in there, it's going to move. And once that season is behind you, most of your product is sold through. But it's a really competitive space. You have some tough customers that you're dealing with, great customers. I mean, you really, you have to establish partnerships with these different customers. And, but when it works and when it's done well, and when you really assess the needs of your customers and where they want to grow with the types of products and margins and whatever their respective strategies are, if you can achieve that well, and their goal is basically to take money and invest it in something and make more money with it. And those who did it well could stand to do really well. And it was a blast. And a big part of it was in licensing different brands. So whether it was, Ralph Lauren or Dockers or Izod or Minecraft, we had a lot of entertainment licenses, zeroing in on what those licenses were. You're essentially borrowing equity from big companies and, doing deals with them in terms of how long those guarantees are and what the royalty rates are and that sort of thing. But it's a blast. It's a really fun business. It's a really creative business. And like anything in the consumer space, product is king. I had a phenomenal design team. And, I think that was one key differentiator for us, among other things.
So right, so I just want to get that point out there because the customers or the clients in this case are those major retailers. Not necessarily, obviously the customers for those retailers are us, the people who are buying the shoes, the people with kids. You have to think of both, right? Because you have to design a product with those end customers in mind. But then again, from a business standpoint, your customer is Target and Walmart and whoever, um, which
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I just make sure people understood that and where you were coming from as far as the challenge that you faced in scaling your business.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
100%. You have to
okay.
know where the trends are going from a consumer standpoint, like you're saying, people like you and us who are buying the products, but also, what's happening in the, my customer space, which are those retailers. So, yeah, you have different stakeholders for sure, and you have to make sure that you're satisfying all of them in order to be successful.
Right. Okay. So with that being just kind of laid out, tell us a little bit about the how you dealt with. We talked about this in a prior episode, so I'm interested to hear this. The fear of change, the fear of resistance, right? Because some people say, well, people hate change. Well, and we talked about, well, they don't necessarily hate change. They don't like um, uncertainty and fear of losing their job and things like that, right? So if the change is good, people will embrace it. If the change is threatening, they might not embrace it. So how did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, sort of like I said earlier, I mean, enrolling them in every step of the way. So I would meet with every department for hours at a time and solicited their feedback and talked about where I wanted to take the company. And, I really wanted their honest and open feedback. And, I really made sure that department by department, I really heard from them in terms of what their concerns were, in terms of the direction where I wanted to head. And it was great. I mean, I thought, some of the best meetings were those who would say that'll never work. Or a big issue then was e-commerce. There were a lot of people who felt like, oh, our price points are too low. That'll never work in our space. And it's like, guys, no, we really, to survive, we're going to really need to participate in this space. But let me hear what your concerns are. And then I'll tell you how I think we're going to be able to overcome them together. But more than anything, like I really, whether it was in scheduled meetings or going on walks with key people or sitting down and, just soliciting one-on-one feedback, the more that they felt safe and they realized that they really could be honest with me and really challenge me. And that is what I'm all about. I mean, I really like to be challenged. I like people to sort of tell me like, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. And that's true some of the times. I mean, I like hearing that from people. And I
Yeah.
think when they started really, you talked about that psychological safety, when they sensed that it was safe to do that with me. And that on the other hand, that I had thought it through a bit and I have a little bit of a track record how I had done some of these things before. I think we eventually got to a point, and it took time without question. But I think that's really, just a lot of conversations like that. And I think in the end, it actually probably took longer than I'd hoped, to be honest. Like I think I came in, I felt like, oh, I'm going to turn this thing around and it's
Yeah.
going to be bang, bang. But it never does, especially like you had said, people who had been there for a long, long time. It really, and we had to, make some changes as well. Like some of those people had really been there too long. And that also, from a trust standpoint, that was a challenge to that to a degree. But in the end, it actually, we got to a pretty good place, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's great to hear because a lot of what we talk about where the problems arise is when you're not listening or the people threaten to speak up and say, that's not right or something's not right here. And that's when you start to fall into our last episode with Chris Gillen about the villain trap, where he, maybe the leader becomes threatened by the person who's challenging him the whole time. And that's where the trust breaks down and that's where you start to have the issue. So it's great to hear that you wanted to be challenged and you welcome that. And that's what you did to make people feel safe and talking and getting out there. So that is great stuff, and it is absolutely wonderful to hear how you put it into practice because we've been talking a lot about that on prior episodes. So let's move now actually to the hiring and how you kept the talent coming in that would embrace the new culture. Now we've talked a little bit about the job search and how the job search is a little challenged these days. Um, how did you interview for people to fit into this culture without kind of fitting in the trap of, all right, we don't want to hire the exact same type of person over and over, but I guess I'm asking you, do you ever, in your hiring decisions, do you ever hire someone who might not have checked all the check boxes but you thought would fit versus someone who checked all the check boxes and you thought might not align culturally? Do you know what I'm asking? It's
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, the goal was to make sure that whoever we hired would fit in with our values, and that absolutely was key. Our values were heart, honor, excellence, accountability, responsiveness, and teamwork. And so we certainly leveraged those in the interview process. But at the same time, you don't want to have like clones, everybody sort of being the same,
right.
then you're not going to really get anything. And so mostly we would make sure that we were bringing people on that would bring something additive to the business. I remember, and again, to your, other question as well, like there was a customer that we really could not break into as an example. It just, it was driving me crazy no matter what product we created for them, how great a margin, an IMU, internal markup we gave to them, whatever it was, we just could not crack the code. And a resume came across my desk for someone who had a lot of experience with this individual customer. And even though from a fit standpoint, I would say at best she met two of the five values. I wanted to get into this customer at all costs. It was a big, growing customer that
Hmm.
was important for us to be in, and we hired her, and it was a train wreck. I mean, it was just again, by the time, even though we got further down the road with that customer, I mean, the wake of destruction that this woman left in terms of trust with her peers and
Hmm.
integrity and other things, it was terrible. But so certainly we've made mistakes. There's certain times you want a skill so badly, or someone who designs a particular type of product that you don't have in house. And you always want to bring someone who brings something additive. Could be culturally, it could be an actual skill, it could be anything. And I think that's important because like I said, you don't want to just have everybody fitting the same box. You're not going to
Right.
bring about the type of dynamic change and aggressive types of products and things. You need to have a variety of people, in my opinion, to be successful. But for sure, I have personally swung and missed on people who sometimes, even though like on paper and then I'm like, man, I don't know if this is the right one, but I really want to get into this customer,
Hmm.
and certainly made some mistakes and
Yep.
learned the hard way from that. And it's a balance; it really is.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear that you talk about somebody that just didn't work because they didn't fit. But that is interesting and important stuff to share. That is a valuable lesson, certainly. But what I want to get into now is the customer experience, of course. So the question for you actually is, I know it's a bit of we're shifting gears here, but how does this culture show up in the customer experience? And then can you give us some sort of example of where that connection was crystal clear?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I believe really strongly that culture is everything. I mean, I really I do believe it trumps so many different things: strategy, marketing. When you have a good, strong culture where people are fired up and really engage and believe in what you're all about, when we would go to customer meetings with Walmart, for example, you sense that. Like the success that we achieved at Walmart had a lot to do, like certainly great design, great products, being very strategic in the white space we were trying to fill for them, and making sure the product would sell through, making sure it's the right licenses. But the energy that my product and design and marketing and licensing brought into those meetings, that I really do believe was derived straight from the culture that we were building. I felt that when our culture started to improve further and further and further along, so did our relationships with those key customers. And so, now listen, you have to deliver on time, and you have to make sure that
Yeah.
your product is of a high quality, and you have to make sure that you're living up to everything that you're promising to them, and you're better than your competition. That's a given. You have to do all that stuff. But I really do believe, even though I never sat in any of my competitors' product meetings, I just know in my heart that because of our strong culture and belief in everything that we were doing, everyone was sort of drinking the Kool-Aid. Those meetings just had a level of excitement and energy and belief. And honestly, nothing was better. Once in a we all had these values medallions they were a nice heavy coin that listed our values on it and a couple other pretty cool things. And once in a while, a customer would challenge one of my people, like, "How can I believe what you're telling me? You're telling me that you're going to deliver this stuff by February. We only have 92 days." And my person would someone work for me would take out his coin and be like, "You see this coin? See this thing that says accountability? That's what we're about. I'm not going to make a promise that I can't deliver to you." And I would nothing that would make me more prideful than that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's hard to really, pinpoint a precise thing maybe, but I can just tell you, just in terms of the overall tone and energy, and just like I said, those relationships could just continue to get better and better the stronger our internal culture just kept manifesting.
That's great stuff. And yeah, I love the fact that they had the tangible coin, because we also talked about having tangible stuff to bring with you in this kind of increasingly digital world that really brings points home, more than it maybe used to, because we're just so in tune with having everything right in front of us. I'm looking at my computer screen. So that's a fun one. That's a great lesson and a great idea to have something tangible with you at a client meeting. Um, okay, let's talk a little bit. Gosh, I've got so many leadership related questions here, but why don't we talk about what is the one cultural lesson you wish you learned early in your leadership journey that you could share with the audience?
I would say, like a little bit of like, I used to feel that sometimes people arguing a lot or debating a lot or a high level of people opposing one another's views was like a sign of a broken culture. Like it was sort of like, oh my God, I'm going to have to quell this, or my team is not aligned, or, Houston, we have a problem. But I think like it really took me some time to realize though, like the more like debate you have and the more people being comfortable challenging one another's views, that to me is a sign of like a healthy culture. Like if you don't have that, something is wrong. And actually, like sometimes in my, I had these like monthly leadership, team meetings, senior team meetings with my team, and they were phenomenal meetings. But once in a while, I thought we were getting along too well. I'd be like, guys, like we're not just here to like hear what each other has to say and, tell each other what a great job we're doing in our respective departments. That's not what I want this to be. Like, I want us to be challenging our thinking, mine as well. Like that's what we need. We'll be better for it. And I do think like for a long part of my career, I mean, again, I've been in the business for 35 years or so. I'd say for my first 20 or so, I used to think that was really a sign of a bad culture, people arguing or, taking one another on. Now, listen, you have to do it in the appropriate way. If, delivery matters and respecting one another matters, and that's a given. But I guess that's one thing that I really felt like I feel like the more I get on in my career, the more I appreciate people who are comfortable challenging each other, and it doesn't happen enough. The other thing too is just like feedback, like giving one another feedback, and just pulling someone aside and telling them like, hey, like I thought you were great in this meeting, or I thought we could have done better here, or but all of that is something that I felt like when we got to that place where there was a lot of comfort and being vulnerable, because to challenge someone takes a little bit of organizational courage. It's not
Right.
comfortable. It's easier not to. It's easier
Let's
not to give tough feedback.
go
But
along to get along.
yeah, absolutely. But when you have that, it's actually like when I feel best. Like I'm feeling like, wow, like now it's getting interesting. Now we're getting to a place where there is a lot of trust, and that was great that came out of that, and we're better for it. And I guess that's one that comes to mind.
That's a great one. That is a great one, because right, the problem becomes where you are not, or you do not feel safe speaking out or challenging what's going on, especially when you see firsthand something that's going wrong. You see customers upset, and perhaps you're not going about something in the right way. And again, we talked about this in previous episodes. Hey, we're in the meeting, everything's great, we're wonderful, everything's great, and well, no, not necessarily, not really. Then you're challenging, you're not on board, right? You're threatening a little bit, and and now, thanks to Chris in the episode, you're kind of risking you're getting into that villain trap like he talked about. So that is great to hear that you welcome that and recognize that a healthy culture is one that respectfully challenges each other, so you can get out there. And I always say the same thing, like, I want to be am I doing the right thing? Like, are we actually going to be able to pull this off for this client in this amount of time? Don't tell me yes just because the client says I need it by 8th business day. We got to be able to do it reasonably, and it can't be too much of a burden on your team and things like that. So that is great to hear.
The
I
one
have
thing I would
one.
add too to that, just
Yeah, go ahead.
like I do think it goes back to that like psychological safety we talked about, like, but making sure like it's up to a leader to really create that safe space, and a lot of the time in those meetings, like I would acknowledge some things that I didn't do wrong, that I did wrong. I'd be like,
Right.
guys, you know what? We had that meeting and I don't feel like I was at my best. I think we could have done better there or, and I just think like whatever tips or tricks or ideas you have to make sure that, you create a space where they are comfortable doing that. It's okay to not be 100% buttoned up or to not have the right idea or to, and I tried often to mention when I highlighted something that I didn't do as well as I probably should have, I felt like they felt safer to sort of, challenge one another.
Yeah, that is great stuff. Hey, I got one more question on the interview segment for you, the wrap up question. If a new CEO came up to you right now and said, "Hey, where do I even start with culture transformation?" What would you sell? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think you first of all need to really, you have to listen. I mean, you have to, spend, certainly 3 to 6 months to really understand what the prevailing culture is. And at the same time, you have to really understand where you want to take it. Like, what are those non-negotiables for you that are going to really be the culture that you want to create? But more than anything, it is enrolling the people. It is not a top down kind of thing at all. It's a bottoms up kind of thing. And the more, and I'm talking from everyone, from
Hmm.
customer service to, the driver, the receptionist, everybody there plays a key role in terms of the culture. It's not just the people who, make the most money or have the most power. It's everyone, and I think you can't fake that stuff. And I think the more that you really demonstrate that you're interested in hearing, what is good about the culture that they want to preserve, but what is not good about the culture that they want to change, and at the same time infusing some of your thoughts and ideas in terms of what matters to you and where you want to take it, and where the market is heading, the types of people that you want to attract. I just found that the more open and transparent, and spanning you are throughout the organization, that's where I would begin. And I think when you do that heavy lifting in the beginning, and really make sure that every voice is heard and every voice matters, I think in the end it may take a more time doing it that way, but you'll get to where you want to go to on a less bumpy ride, I think.
That is great stuff, and I think the focus on learning. Sorry about that. The focus on listening is
Yeah.
refreshing to hear, rather than I'm in charge now. Here's what the hell's going to happen. So, uh, great stuff. Let's move to the segments. Okay, everyone, it is time for my favorite segment, Does It Hold Water? This is where I ask my guest to be our resident expert witness for the day. And I read them a quote, a piece of thought leadership, and we see if they agree if it holds water or not. Maybe it has a few holes in it. Matt, you ready to go?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'm one who tends to buy things later in the cycle, and so the defense case today says this basically: the traditional fashion calendar is no longer relevant because consumer purchase cycles have shifted to a buy now, wear now model, driven by weather and changing seasonal patterns. Does this hold water?
It does. It does hold water. Yeah. I mean, the seasonal calendar is sort of gone out the window to a large degree. It's absolutely true that, consumers have more power than ever. Now listen, retailers do have to plan and they have to, buy seasonally and plan accordingly. But I would say that the country is much warmer than it used to be. It used to, we used to sort of plan according to weather, and 60% of the country is over 80 degrees throughout the entire year. And so it's absolutely true. You have to really be as close to what the consumer wants than you ever have before. And yeah.
That because I'm a buy now wear now. I just feel like I'm going to go into the store and the Christmas stuff is going to be out in a couple weeks. And you go in and the Christmas stuff is out in September or October. The back to school is probably already out and it's July. And I feel like everything's always 2 or 3 months ahead. And I'm not thinking of that stuff until oh my God, I need some shorts and some shirts to go play golf because it's now 80 degrees out. And so I'm usually about a week or two behind, probably where I should be. But I feel like the stores are always a month or two ahead. So is that changing, or
It is
what should,
changing. Yeah,
yeah.
it is changing. And I find in terms of, customers of ours are buying differently for sure. And, I think delaying some of those introductions, further and further. So it is closer to that, when the actual consumers are wanting it. And it's a more competitive space than ever. And, you don't want, goods that are on the shelves that are just going to sit there for a couple of months. That is a losing proposition, not only for the retailer, but for the wholesaler as well. You have to, have the right product at the right price, at the right price, at the right place, at the right time. And that's the name of the game. And, it has changed, quite a bit. You honed in on something that really has changed. And I think you'll see it more and more from all of the different customers that are out there, all the retailers.
Okay. If I see the Halloween stuff in August, I'm giving you a call.
You
Although
might, you might, but less and less so.
you remember the Crazy Eddie used to have his Christmas sale in August?
Yeah, absolutely. Insane.
That's right. So I remember those commercials being a kid. So hopefully that is changing, because that is just something that drives me crazy. So all right, great stuff. Let's move to chip shots. Okay, it's time for chip shots. These are my fun yet professional questions. We try to go with 3 or 4. They're a little shorter form. And let's start with the book question. We asked this to everyone, Matt. One book that has significantly influenced you, your personal or professional life, and how did it impact you?
I would say The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni was one that really hit home for me. Obviously, I am a culture guy, and I think you sense that from this conversation. But he really said more than anyone I had heard that like culture really is a competitive advantage, more so than some of the other, functions that you might think, whether it's, sales or marketing or operations but I do find, and it goes to, what I said earlier, that when you do have, just a winning culture where people really are bought in and are excited to be there, it just increases everything else exponentially. And I really, that was like one of the first books I had read that really, explained that, just so clearly. It really, like, so many things that I was sort of thinking about just crystallized. And yeah, that's one that really had a big impact on me.
That's it. Yeah. So it brought it all together, because a lot of times you think these things kind of, I don't know if I'm using the right word, kind of indirectly, you bring these thoughts together in your head, but to see it as that kind of cohesive unit in a structured argument in a book like that really brings the point home and sticks with you.
Yeah.
And of course, I think the phenomenon you're talking about, that we talk a lot about on this show, is of course that experience and employee experience leads into the client experience or the customer experience, and makes it so much easier to present a firm and an organization that is empathetic and works well with their clients, and really, when you enjoy what you're doing, you could tell, right? And the client knows,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
The customers know. They
absolutely.
know when somebody's just going through the motions, or is miserable, or is really stretched too thin. I think it shows a lot, especially with increased layoffs and things like that. People have too much work on their plate. It shows, and so it is. Everybody talks about how it's important, but I think only certain people live it, and certainly it sounds like you have. So that's wonderful. Okay, let's go with that question, falling right along the leader question. If you could spend a day shadowing a leader or professional in any industry right now, who would it be, and what would you hope to learn?
That is a tough one. I'm a sports nut, and so I'm always pretty fascinated by different coaches that are out there. And one that I've always admired and been pretty blown away by is Greg Popovich. But just the way he is able to, establish such a high level of trust with his assistant coaches, with his players, and just under like such intense pressure situations, has still been able to win, huge playoff games and championships. And I don't know, he just seems like such a guy of integrity, discipline, and never seems to waver in terms of his beliefs. And just someone who I've always really admired. I really I love watching coaches like him on the sidelines and just how he's speaking to his players. And there's just always, you can always really see it in their eyes, like whether these players truly do respect and admire
Yeah.
and believe in these coaches. And with him, it was just always different. Even since, he's retired, and, you just still hear the way some of his former players talk about him, or former coaches. I think someone was like inducted to a Hall of Fame recently and acknowledged like what a huge impact he had on their lives. And yeah, I just that would be one that really stands out for me.
That's great. That is our first sports related answer
All
to that
right.
question. There you go. Great job. Let's go with the most. We talked about this a little, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What's the most unexpected or unconventional lesson you learned in your career?
uh, I would say in meetings, just like silence, sometimes I find that people just, when you aren't getting to where you want to get to, sometimes people just talk too much. And I have found that sometimes when I'm in a really intense meeting, and I just stop talking for like, 20 seconds, it sounds like and it feels like a really long time, but often like what's really going on comes out. And I don't use it enough, because I really have found that like when it really dawns on me to be like, this is a good time to sort of keep your mouth shut and just see what happens. It's an underused approach, and one that's very counterintuitive in today's society, where everybody just wants to talk and get their point of view out there. But that's one that kind of jumps out for me.
Yeah, silence is definitely a tool, and it is. You're right; it is not used very often. Everybody wants their thoughts out there. They want their likes. They want their reposts. They want,
That's true.
and so it's same things in meetings. But you want to speak up, and you want to show the boss how brilliant you are and how much you care. And I understand exactly what you're saying. So that is definitely interesting. All right, last one. Do you have a particular failure early in your career that taught you a valuable lesson?
Oof, I've had a lot of them for sure. Uh, you know, I would say, I mean, one of the biggest failures that I had was, back in the day at Reebok. We used to have a line of shoes that had charms on them, and one of them actually, this was pretty young in my career, but um, it a child in Minnesota ingested it, and complained to his parents over and over. Parents didn't do anything about it. He ended up, dying. This like 4 year old boy
Yeah.
from Minnesota, and it was for me like someone who was like coming up the ranks at Reebok and achieving a lot of things. It really, broke my heart on a level. And I really, at the time, like it really, really hit me hard. And what really came to me though was that there were like 4 or 5 people at Reebok who really like pulled me aside and really like gave me the support, people who you wouldn't expect. And I really learned from that like, listen, you see a lot of people failing throughout business, and, hopefully not as terrible as the example that I gave, but like really taking the time to like pick people up when they're down. It had such a huge impact on me that I've really tried to do more and more of that when I see it. And it's important, like listen, we're human beings, and yeah, like I'm a competitive guy. I like winning. I like, figuring out how I'm going to scale a business, and I love that. It's a lot of fun. But I really do find that like there are a lot of failures, or a lot of people who go through really tough things in their lives, and the more that you can really like stick your arm out and be there for people and make them feel like you care about them beyond just the business at hand. I just found that like as a leader, like my relationships got so much stronger with the people who I've worked with over the years, and that was a real lesson. that I learned. And I'd like to think I do a good job of that, but you can always do more of it. And you never
That's true.
really know. Like, certain people, they come in and they're in a tough spot, and you don't know what they're dealing with at home, or
Right.
health wise, or anything else. And so I really try and, I'm an intense guy. I like to move fast. I like to win. I like to do a lot of things, but I really do try and remind myself of that as often as I possibly can.
Yeah, that is a great reminder. You never know what else could be going on with someone. So um, just give it a pause and give it a thought. So, absolutely tremendous guest, Matt Feiner. Thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you tell the audience where they could find you?
Yeah, well, you can find me on LinkedIn for sure, and I try and post, regularly often. But that's probably the best bet. And yeah, I love hearing from people, and whatever it may be. And this has been really great, Gary. I've really enjoyed it.
No, you're quite. This has absolutely been a blast for me. So thanks so much for being here, and thank you all for tuning in once again to your customer success. We'll be back with more client experience leaders, customer success leaders, and we got a few tricks up our sleeve. Maybe an investment roundup, and maybe even another solo episode here and there. So thanks once again. That's all for today, and bye for now. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you found something insightful that will enhance your experiences and drive your success. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and share your thoughts to help us improve the show. Don't forget to head on over to mariscxhub.com for more ways to connect with me and learn more about experience management. Until next time, I'm Gary Mara, working hard for your customer and your success.